Lush is the premier ethical cosmetics brand today, and for good reason. It built on a foundation established by an old colleague, improving the many faults in the Body Shop's marketing. But that's not to say that Lush was a hit right off the bat, and that's also not to say that it's been void of some eerily similar criticisms. According to the Lush website, Lush was begun by 5 founders after Mark Constantine's business, Cosmetics To Go, went under in 1995. But this is obviously a simplification of what really happened. Previously, I did a video on the Body Shop and I mentioned how Mark Constantine was the early chemist to a lot of Anita Roddick's products. However, what I didn't tell you was that they had worked together for about 20 years through Mark's company Constantine & Ware from 1976 all the way through to 1991. After which, during a dispute about copyright, Anita bought that company for $17 million, though according to Forbes in 2012, they never received the final $6 million payment. It's with this 11-ish million that he began a totally separate company called Cosmetics To Go in the same year of 1991 with his wife, who prefers to go by Mo. Cosmetics To Go was a mail order company who sent out these catalogs. As you can see here, they sold quite a wide array of cosmetics, but interestingly, they also sold their own branded products under the Cosmetics To Go label, including these for very brave men hairstyling products, which I just find so great. However, by this point in 1991, mail order was already a very saturated market, monopolized by Avon, and was already heavily on the decline in popularity anyway, which had started at the end of the 1980s. So, with Cosmetics To Go, Mark and Mo really never had a shot of making it work, but it certainly didn't help that the structure of the company was also quite poor. Quote, his limits as a businessman quickly became apparent. He priced the products too cheaply, underestimating the cost of the customer service in the back room, but by the time he realized his error, it was too late. Cosmetics To Go filed for bankruptcy in 1994. With every order, we lost money, he says. Actually, specifically, this comment in the r/Lush Cosmetics Reddit group explains more directly what happened, which I'll summarize just in case you are listening. So they blame it on high orders, high running costs, and a lack of staff, all of which were a problem before they hosted this sale that caused the company to lose about £1 or around $2 with every order due to expensive packaging, high production costs, and including free postage. For this reason, it makes sense to close the business, write off the losses in bankruptcy, and start fresh with just a totally new business. So yes, Cosmetics To Go did fail, but it actually wasn't for lack of demand, which is how it sounds on the Lush website today. Instead, clearly there was a market need for what they produced and curated. They just needed a better structure around it. As a result, Cosmetics To Go proved to be an incredibly valuable learning experience for the setup of Lush, as they could have learned the products most in demand, the location of interested customers, and how to format the pages for the best-selling products, amongst other things, like basically just how to run a B2C business, as this was their first attempt at that. In that regard, Cosmetics To Go was paramount to the incoming success that would be Lush. I say this directly because the date that Lush claimed to have been founded is probably untrue. Though it seems true Cosmetics To Go folded in 1995, the company that would soon be called Lush had actually incorporated on the 17th of June 1994 as Cosmetic House Limited, telling us that this was no mistake to close the original company. They had clearly seen the shortcomings of Cosmetics To Go and actively aimed to tackle their issues in a new launch. They changed their name to Lush in April 1995, which is where I actually think the claim of foundation comes from, and Lush as a company was born. But just as a surprising tidbit, again, Lush hadn't actually been yet named Lush. The name had come from a competition in their newsletter where the winner could pick the whole brand's name. I don't know how they got the newsletter without a name in the first place, but they must have, and Lush was eventually born, establishing their first store in Poole in 1995. I won't go into the founders too much, lest we unnecessarily be here for a millennia, but for now, know the founders were Mark Constantine, his wife Margaret, nicknamed Mo, Rowena Bird, Helen Abrosen, Paul Greaves, there are no photos of Paul Greaves, and Liz Bennett, née Ware. which of course is where the where in Constantine and Where comes from the original company that he worked with the Body Shop with. Together, they conceived Lush's perspective as an ethical company and formulated all of their different products, many of which, notably the bath bombs, were basically the same as the products sold under the Cosmetics To Go own brand. However, it should also be noted that by 1995, Constantine and Ware's non-compete clause for the Body Shop had newly run out, allowing them to effectively put into action all of the elements that they had learned from Anita and from Cosmetics To Go in a way that directly competed with the, at that point, already failing Body Shop. This is evident absolutely immediately from launch, with elements like purposely having pungent products to arrest passers into interest, the same tactic Anita had used in the original Body Shop store in Brighton with her fragrance spray, and in the idea of standardized packaging to heavily reduce production costs. A sticker on a standard bottle is far cheaper than unique bottles after all. Though I feel like I should say for anyone that hasn't watched my Body Shop video or my Anita Roddick biography, she had actually stolen these ideas herself from a store that she discovered in San Francisco, so there's no need to feel frustrated on her behalf. This is typically how retailing moves forward anyway. It's very, very standard. Especially as the Body Shop had recently seen a major scandal that saw most of its customers desperately look for an alternative. You see, in 1994, a scathing article from John Entine named Shattered Image Is the Body Shop Too Good to Be True was released, exposing the Body Shop for the many mistruths or the exaggerations in their marketing and product development. This article was very notably the beginning of the end of Roddick's business, and Constantine knew this all too well, even participating in John Entine's research, saying none of the world-building or storytelling done by the Body Shop was truthful. Mark instead claimed that he had developed most, if not all, of the products that Anita was claiming to have found on her journeys across the world, and Mark even went on to say that the idea of promoting that the Body Shop was against animal testing was also his because Anita didn't care about that. The fall of the Body Shop wasn't exactly slow, and until 1995, there simply wasn't an alternative in England. So when Lush did eventually launch the following year, so still in 1995, the business boomed. Even just Mark alone had had decades of experience, not just in cosmetics, but in ethical cosmetics, improving on everything that the team had learned from both of the businesses. It had also had an enormous budget behind it, considering at the very least that Constantine and Liz Bennett both invested their own millions into the business. Even the first year ended with just shy of an £85,000 in shareholders' funds, so it was very obvious that this was going to do well right from the outset, and it really did. They opened a second store in Covent Garden, I believe in 95 or 96, then King's Cross, again in 95 or 96, both of these majorly prime retail locations. They signed a joint venture agreement to expand into North America and Canada by 1996. They opened a store in Croatia and one in Australia, which was also a joint venture in 1997, one in Sweden and then Vancouver and British Columbia by 1998, Brazil in 1999, and Dublin in 2000. Bearing in mind most businesses fail in their first year, Lush was seriously international within only 5 and had established a second company named Lush Manufacturing Limited in 1997 in order to separate the manufacturing side of the company, as I assumed that they had needed. In fact, their planning for Lush was so successful that even after their 2010 rebrand, you can still go into any Lush store today and see many of the same elements that the company started with. They have paper packaging, those huge soap bars that are cut and weighed, bath bombs with an enormous markup, the incredible stench that makes it very obvious where the store is, and these standardized bottles for liquid products. Effectively, as the Body Shop was falling from grace, Lush was just there to take the market share in this very specific market of ethically motivated cosmetics. Of course, in the early days, this saw some criticism. One example from 1998 in the Seattle Times called Lush a Body Shop knockoff, but one that was so successful that competitors were now copying its trademark bath bomb. And weirdly, the Seattle Times wasn't exactly wrong. Lush was a copy of the Body Shop, as really the only main perceivable difference between the two, aside from branding obviously, was that Lush wasn't an activist brand in the same manner that the Body Shop was. While the Body Shop had screamed about countless causes, including animal testing, supporting developing countries, women's rights, HIV, shopping local, etc., 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 none of them really fit together. While Lush was far more quiet and succinct about the causes that it supported. They had just one cause, animal rights, and based all of their cause marketing, which was also generally more quiet conveyed anyway, solely on that. And that's, in my opinion, for very good reason. The 1994 Body Shop scandal was really atrocious for their company. And being that it was only 1 year before the first Lush store was fully established, in my opinion, would have given Mark a fair warning to be very careful with their own cause marketing. You see, until this point, it had been extremely beneficial to the Body Shop to talk about their activism as it did drive sales from like-minded people. But now that all of their marketing was disbelieved, their reputation was ruined. Now it was a liability to claim goodness or charity because it was hard for consumers to believe, regardless of if the claims were true. So Lush was significantly more quiet about it. They definitely did still foundation themselves with ethics. Most of their products were vegan and if not vegetarian. They released their We Believe statement to communicate their perspective, though really only 2 of those are political, and they only had products and ingredients tested on human volunteers. But in comparison to the Body Shop, who was shouting their perspective from the rooftops, Lush's communication was notably more subtle. It was in their presentation style, or it was communicated verbally by shop assistants, which may feel to a consumer more honest. It was still cause marketing, but just done in a really different way. On top of that, when the Body Shop was becoming more corporate with their rebranding in the year 2000, Lush remained homespun in presentation and as a result furthered the distance between themselves and the now flailing main competitor. In comparison, Lush felt authentic and as such directly benefited from the Body Shop's downfall. The only major downside to this was the tricky PR in the comparisons, which do obviously still exist today. For example, I received many comments from people that had worked at or shopped at Lush, telling me all about their experiences with things like cult-like staff and hyperbolized stories of their founding. This one in particular I find interesting as this person's boss told her that Anita had maliciously stolen Mark Constantine's recipes for soap and other products and started their company as direct competition. Obviously, by this point, you can see for yourself how that isn't necessarily untrue, but it is a very reduced version of the truth. They did have a copyright dispute, which saw her take his recipes in 1991, but it was with that money from buying the company that the 5 founders could begin Lush. This isn't an outright lie, it's just without nuance. It's without full context of everything that has happened since. Maybe this boss didn't know it, of course, I don't know the guy, but he may just be repeating what he had heard. But in fact, this perception of how the company is seen, even in the early days, was very prevalent. And so I'm sure several staff really did believe that Lush was this underdog business that rose to fame in spite of what Anita did, feeding into this kind of nationalistic mentality about Lush over their competitors, or specifically over the Body Shop. I should probably mention also that there's absolutely no way all staff members feel like this. Hell, even the people that commented were staff members that clearly didn't believe it. But this perception was still something they have been unable to shift. I just think even if you weren't given the Kool-Aid to drink, because they're so obviously the underdog to the now very media demonized Body Shop, it was hard not to rally behind the successfully rising star. And I'm sure at least in the early days, Lush did little to stop it because it was so easy to benefit from. Perhaps this is best explained in a book from Seth Godin called Tribes, where he says, leadership almost always involves thinking and acting like the underdog. That's because leaders work to change things and people who are winning rarely do. It takes something extraordinary, a call to action that is irresistible, and a cause worth fighting for to make people actually join. If you're not over the top, you're not going to have any chance at all of making things happen. So, we've established the establishment of Lush. We've discussed the expansion across the world and how it positioned itself to be the antithesis of the Body Shop. But soon their foundation was going to need to be built on. They started this, of course, with more cause marketing. the same tactic that the Body Shop had used, which effectively sees that a company tells the audience the goodness that they do to try to encourage brand loyalty through shared perspectives. However, this was exactly the thing that had caused the downfall of the Body Shop, so they knew they had to be careful. Before this point, their cause marketing was present, obviously, but it was quiet, and they could get away with it because they were seen as the smaller company. But now, by 2006-2007, they had the brand awareness to put their money where their mouth is, by taking a stance against palm oil because of the detrimental effect to the orangutans during harvesting. Of course, they had long been animal cruelty-free. That was really the only platform that they had ever talked about. Most products were vegan, if not vegetarian, and so this was just a very low-risk manner in which to expand their cause marketing, sticking their flag into the ethical marketing sphere by using their position against animal cruelty in their marketing campaigns. This came with a range of greenwash label cosmetics, that's a name, not greenwashing, all free of palm oil, which saw that customers could buy into the campaign for support. This, of course, proved Lush could also make a lot of money through the commercialization of people's emotions through shared ethics, but more importantly, the campaign had the more direct benefit of ethically aligning the company publicly with animal cruelty-free products. And so, from this point, they participated in at least one ethical campaign per year. They have a whole section of their site dedicated to it, in fact, called We Are Campaigns, showing off mostly animal-based causes, of course, keeping everything on brand. This obviously is a good thing. To see that they are against animal cruelty, they have minimal packaging, etc., but two things do stick out. The first is that from the beginning, they produced several products for almost every cause that they had, and secondly, that they're all very low-risk causes. None of these are controversial to the public whatsoever, and because of the bath bombs, it seems that the emphasis on the campaigns is primarily to give the public and themselves a shared cause to connect themselves together. From a business perspective, this is pretty smart. The Lush consumer is obviously influenced by the ethical alignment of the products, and because they are largely based in animal cruelty, it's a shared ethic and it looks really authentic because they have always been vegetarian. It may be a very obvious way of making money off of people's emotions, but it does have the effect that it emotionally connects the brand to their audience through pre-existing shared beliefs. It convinces customers to buy more products in order to serve the shared cause, and the campaigns are all quite agreeable for the widest audience and as such are low risk, all of which coming together to make that brand loyalty much stronger. Basically, they'd learned from Anita's mistakes in risky, introductory cause marketing and applied just the most effective parts of it to get the most benefit from it. Truly, the comparisons between the Body Shop are hard to miss even at this stage, and I hope I'm doing a good job at explaining them in context because it does seem that so much of Lush was built off of being the remedy to all of the Body Shop's shortcomings, while actually being quite similar in execution, i.e. they had no advertising, standardized packaging, and the obvious ethical stance. They simply did it better for the time and had a very distinctly different world building and brand image that resonated with the people they were trying to target. To be honest, this never really ended. In a way, I find it interesting that Anita's Body Shop was an improvement on the original concept of the Body Shop, which she stole from a couple in San Francisco, which she does admit to in her autobiography, and then Lush just continued to perfect this recipe by taking almost all of the elements that made Anita's Body Shop successful. That's not to say they stopped at being a copycat though, because they definitely did expand on their strategies quite notably, with things like the water bowl in stores so that customers could try the products and offer an experiential element to the stores. And the best example, in my opinion, is their anchor stores having exclusives that actively encourage customers into multiple stores as a way to tackle the negative side of the rise of the internet and to introduce a collectability to their products. This period of Lush, where they're slightly expanding on the idea, continues for about 15 years. But it's not conclusively successful. They had begun to have localized scandals in all of the UK, Australia, and Canada, which had begun to shift public perception of the company. In the UK, they had an insensitively named soap in 2015, which was a minor scandal. In Australia, they admitted to owing ex-staff members up to $2 million in back pay, a medium scandal. And in Canada, they were accused of union busting and poor working conditions, which is obviously a pretty serious scandal. Obviously, no company at the top of their game is without scandal, nor are they without reproach. But it does evidence the ever-impending risk of cause marketing in that when a company claims to do better than everyone else, they are held to that higher standard. You're not surprised when L'Oreal has a child labor scandal, but you are surprised when Lush union busts. You are surprised when they pay themselves $5.1 million in bonuses after taking $5 million in state support. You are surprised when they donate to known anti-trans groups. All of these things, because of the way that they present themselves, massively impacts their positive public perception. It significantly harms their business over another company that doesn't claim to be as golden as they do. As a result, it really doesn't take much searching to find people that are skeptical of the things that Lush claim. There are whole Reddit threads about it. There's a whole Instagram page about it. There are a lot of people that simply don't believe what Lush is saying. Of course, some of that can be put on our pessimism as consumers because we are so jaded by cause marketing and by large companies that don't seem to always do the right thing. But of course, it is always interesting what comes the most to light. In fact, in 2016, there was a court case based on racial discrimination and victimization in the Oxford Street store from a part-time sales assistant accusing specifically Claire Constantine of conducting these actions, and yet that didn't really become a major scandal, and instead we get stories about how they're expanding their range to include more textured hair types, which I should say is a good thing. We do want that, but it's interesting that the first one didn't become a major news story, but the second one had a fair bit of press. Of course, I very much do support them moving in the right direction in terms of correcting the mistakes that they have made in the past, obviously. But it is definitely interesting how the first one was able to not be picked up by the press as much as the second story, and it does evidence just how curated our news sources are. And yet, with that said, I cannot in all honesty say that this has had a horribly detrimental effect on their bottom line, because there really isn't any way to know. Their sales haven't dipped massively, as far as I could tell, and the UK branch has always been profitable, with the Australian and Asian subsidiaries too. The North American subsidiary was bought out by Lush UK in 2021, which may suggest that they weren't doing the best, but again, we cannot conclusively say if that was for that reason, because maybe they were just in need of a management change, or maybe it was because of the pandemic, which of course happened primarily in 2020. Instead, what we can discuss is how, in the face of these scandals, they were able to win back consumer interest, something they primarily did with fandoms, collaborating with various different companies and IPs. I'm sure you know many of them. This really started with Zoe Sugg of Zoella after a three-way collaboration between Lush, Zoe, and Rizzle Kicks member Jordan Stevens, who participated with his charity I Am Whole. I did say this kind of started with these three, because actually this was still affiliated with a charity, and it was still purposeful in raising awareness for the mental health effects of social media, which they followed up the following year by announcing that they would come off social media entirely. So even though it definitely still could be under their cause marketing umbrella, it was a strong segue into collaborations with other businesses because of the affiliation with Zoe Sugg of Zoella. Outside of that, their first truly non-charitable collab was, of all things, One Piece in September 2022, that was then followed by Stranger Things and then Lazy Oaf, all before November had ended just 2 months later in 2022. There are so many benefits to this, honestly. They're able to play on their own fandom of Lush, that collectivist aspect that was successful in their Anchor Store exclusives and holiday collections before. They were able to play on the collaborator brand too. One Piece especially has an incredibly collectivist consumer following. They're able to reach new audiences through this, pulling the younger demographic with things like Super Mario and Barbie, while playing to their millennial demographic with things like Shrek and SpongeBob. It also gives consumers a reason to post online, basically doing the marketing on the behalf of Lush, who still therefore have the ability to claim not to do any of their social media marketing. And it was brilliant at recuperating favor back from the few scandals of a few years before. Really, the only downside to this that I can foresee is that it is a bit of a money grab. Maybe you could also argue that it's a bit inauthentic, being that all of these brands have been commercial powerhouses and have, as such, been quite damaging to the environment anyway. But there's certainly counter-arguments to that. The big one that it offers a more environmentally friendly alternative for those that do want to engage with those IPs and just couldn't before this. All in all, actually, I know a lot of people have strong opinions about Lush, but at least their UK business is back to pre-COVID turnover, even if they aren't profitable again just yet. And it seems that they do have a good marketing structure set up with their cult following and their collabs effectively doing it for them. The concept of Lush was basically stolen from the Body Shop, yes, but the Body Shop itself was a stolen concept, and that's just how retail evolves. I do expect Lush 2 will fail in the not too distant future because of some scandal affected by their cause marketing that they won't be able to recover from because they have just lost $28.1 million in 2023, and so they might not have the funds to actually recover. It's just too easy to predict. But for now, Lush is chugging along. We know that they have decent sales, they have a good following. There's definitely potential there for them to recover from the losses that they're making at the moment. And in my perspective, I would much rather have an environmentally friendly company be successful than one that perhaps doesn't have that dedication. Though I am really excited for the history of retailing to know who will take the market share from Lush. Because if Lush has been improving on the Body Shop and the Body Shop was improving on the Body Shop, I'm really interested to know who is fourth in line to this. Thank you so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more videos like this one. If you're interested in fashion content just like this, do check out my fashion channel Understitch, and a special thank you to my patrons over on Patreon for their ongoing support. All content used in this video is done so in accordance with the principles of fair use. However, if you have any concerns, please contact me directly at contact@understitch.co.uk.